So I have with me today President and CEO of JPS, Michel Gantois, and I have Director of System Operations, Lincoy Small.
I think we've been on record very publicly, we favor renewables.
JPS owns and operates 7 hydro plants and 1 wind turbine.
So our role is not just to put more renewable, but also to put the batteries and the thermal plant that will be used when there's no wind or no sun. So we're doing both.
So tell me something now. Can JPS just one day get up and decide, I'm going to build this plant, I'm going to do that in solar and so on? Do we have that autonomy?
Well, JPS would love to have that autonomy as long as it works in the best interest of Jamaica, right? But that's not how the sector, the policies work in Jamaica. The business of putting new generators on the ground is not the responsibility of JPS, right? But it is more from the planning perspective from our government agencies and our regulator. What JPS ensures that we do is that we play a good supporting role as partners to ensure that all the things that we were talking about, the analysis and the studies, that everything goes according to plan so that we do not compromise the reliability and the affordability of power. So this is something we do in partnership with our government and our regulators, but the main decisions come from the regulators, from the government, I should say, in what is called an integrated resource plan, right, for which we are a part of.
It's important what you say, because often we get the impression that people believe we are responsible for everything related to electricity, and that's not the case. To be perfectly honest, it's a relatively small role. All the decisions that you mentioned about how much renewable to put in the systems, how much to build, what kind of renewable, what kind of thermal, all of these are entirely out of our hand. We have zero control of that. That's government policy. They decide entirely what they want to do for the benefit of the country. They do some analysis. We help them, of course, with some technical knowledge and some modeling, but it's entirely their decisions. And then they release some of the documents, they release some auctions for people to bid and to build power plants. We may or may not participate, but that's our choice, just as other companies. What we do behind the scene, as we said, is if somebody else builds the renewables, we will build the transmission lines. We will make sure that the plants are dispatched and serve all customers when it's needed. But it's really very much a strong support role with technical expertise. But the policy decision, entirely the government.
I noticed you said you're putting in something that's very capital expensive, capital intense, for 25% of its time. So it's not 50%, like, solar would be 12 hours a day, or I don't know, maybe 8, but you're saying 25%, that's relatively small?
So on average, our solar plants tend to produce about 20% of the power that they are rated to produce for the grid. So it means what happens the other 80% of the time? You're even talking about during the day, all right? During the day, 8 to 5, yes, a lot of sun is shining, but on some occasion when those clouds come out and they're passing directly over the plants, there's no production to get. The wind plant typically does about 30-35%. So there's between 70 to 80% of the time that there's just no power coming from these facilities. Do we turn off the lights for Jamaica for 70-80% of the time? Especially when there's World Championship this year and there's the World Cup coming up this year. No way, we can't do that. Hence, that is why in the balancing process, we have other plants that will come online, the gas plants, some of the oil plants from our independent power producers that help to give us this balancing effect. Things can get better in the future, right, as the cost of renewables come down, especially energy storage. So the question might be asked, can we go 100% renewables one day? So could, of course, the possibility does exist. But one, in order to keep your rates down, those costs need to come down. And in addition to getting those costs down, we need to also ensure that the battery storage that we use to save some of the excess energy when these plants are overproducing, that we can redistribute that at other times to keep off what might be expensive oil plants at the time. So as I said, it's all about balance, right? And that's what we're doing at the end of the game, just to ensure that our customers get cheap and reliable power. That's all we're about here.
Okay, great. And I have one more question for you, Michel. Tell us a little bit about what happens in other jurisdictions that you've seen in terms of renewables.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I've seen all the good stories and horror stories. And I was, as you know, I worked in many other countries in Europe, you know, North America, Latin America, Middle East, and Australia. The story and the experience in Australia is very interesting. They went very aggressively in the last 10 years in putting a lot of wind farm and solar plants. They have a lot of sunshine. They have a lot of winds along the coast. It's like a big island, with like a very big Jamaica. So they thought it would be a great idea to do that. But it has never worked as planned for all the reasons we mentioned. And I've seen blackouts in Australia, a first world country that thought they would never see blackouts, and an entire state a few years ago went black. And the reason is they had more than 50% of solar and wind. And they had days with bad weather, and suddenly they didn't have enough of what we call the backup. They didn't have gas turbines ready, they didn't have any backup. They could not import power from another part of the country, and it went black. And that's the kind of things we want to avoid, is people saying, oops, no sun, no wind, what do we do? And then suddenly all the businesses close, the hospital closes, and people have to go back on diesel generator in their homes. They're addressing that, but I was still reading last week, they still do not know exactly what to do. They are now fighting in some state to say who will pay for this additional transmission line I was saying that will bring the power from a remote wind farm or solar farm back to the place where the electricity is consumed, the big cities. They're now fighting between them, says who is going to pay for this additional investment. So those issues are real. I think they should not, of course, detract us from really believing and investing in renewable. Once again, it's a fantastic form of electricity. It will give us independence. It will give us a very clean energy. But we have to do it at the rhythm that makes sure that people indeed do not pay much more for electricity, and to make sure that when you turn on the light switch, you still have the light, you still have the electricity. So we offer it at the right pace at the right time. It is definitely the future. It's coming, it's here. But let's make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of other countries that have done it too fast without the proper thinking, and then the consumers have to suffer the consequences.
Wow. Thank you so much, gentlemen. You heard it yourself. Renewables, fantastic opportunity, just needs to be managed properly. This has been The Hot Seat. Thank you.